Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 22nd of April 2022. These are the stories that will be in discussion during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the issue of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We know that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who has been very vocal as far as the atrocities in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are concerned, is here in Pakistan on a 4-day official visit. Now, she has said on Thursday that Kashmir dispute was not being talked about in the power centers of the US at the required level, but she did express the hope that it would be done and that the situation would change. The Indian atrocities as far as this region are concerned is no secret. The world knows the brutalities that are being committed by the Indian forces and the Indian government in the held region, with the people not even be able to breathe properly, conduct a normal life as they can, and to top it all, the resolution for the right to self-determination that still stands in the United Nations since decades has not been applied in principle at all, and neither does the Indian government want to do that. This is going to be our first segment, how to move forward with this. Will the US ever change its perspective as far as Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned? Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the merged tribal areas and the need to put efforts to bring peace and prosperity in these merged areas. What is the government's vision to bring about a change or development in these merged areas? We know that these areas have also seen the brunt of terrorism, and in the past few days and weeks have also seen that with the clashes from across the border from Afghanistan. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shahbaz Shareef, was in the merged tribal areas where he was given a briefing, and of course he has said that he will do the needful in order to bring peace and prosperity to the people of the merged areas. How to come about it? This is going to be our second segment. Our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Earth Day that is being celebrated across the world today. This year's theme, to invest in our planet, is very important, because when you see climate change, when you see pollution, when you see all the other effects that are damaging our Earth's atmosphere, the ozone layer, we as a one global body need to do the needful before it's way too late and before this change becomes irreversible. That is why the Earth Day and today's message to invest in our planet becomes very important. This is going to be our third segment. Then we'll be talking about the 11th death anniversary of Pakistan television star, film, stage artist, humorist, comedian, impersonator, host, writer, singer, director, producer Moin Akhtar, who left us 11 years ago on this very day. Although he might not be physically present, but his legacy lives on through the countless programs and shows that he has done that we can still have access to. So of course our prayers go to him on this day. Let's begin with our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the plight of the Kashmiri people and the world's response to Indian atrocities in the whole context of the presence of US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar in Pakistan. We're in the following report.
The escalating Indian atrocities in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir render the occupied valley as most dangerous flashpoint in contemporary world. Vindicating Pakistan's stance, US Congresswoman Ilhan Abdullahi Omar acknowledged that Kashmir dispute is not being talked about in the power centers of United States of America at the required level. Ilhan Omar also highlighted Modi administration's anti-Muslim rhetoric and its spate of human rights violations. Kashmiris are living in the world's largest prison as BJP government's demographic and ethnic designs has prompted worst militarization of occupied valley, depicting horrors of occupation. Indian police, troops and dreaded National Investigation Agency has been involved in extrajudicial killings and arrests of Kashmiris in their bid to terrorize the valley. The black laws such as Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and Public Safety Act have granted unchecked powers to Indian military who are perpetrating gross human rights violations in occupied valley. Demonstrating brute force, Indian forces not only injured peaceful protesters by firing of pellets and tear gas shells, but also disgraced and molested 4 women during last month. Pakistan is persistently raising plight of Kashmiris at relevant international forums to divert attention of international community towards Indian atrocities. Indian forces are using every brutal tactic to intimidate the Kashmiris into submission, but would never succeed in their nefarious designs.
Political activist Safiullah Khan Ghauri joins us online. Safi, thank you very much to have joined us. Safi, we all understand the plight of the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We also know that not much has been done in terms of pressure applied on the Indian government to for them to ease these atrocities. But at the same time, seeing that the US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who's been very vocal about the Kashmir issue in the past, is now here in Pakistan, and she has also been very vocal about the US stance on the region. Do you feel a change is in the cards, could happen?
We know for a fact that international NGOs that deal with human rights issues have been very vocal. Some of the biggest NGOs in the world, and also the United Nations itself, UNHCR, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, all of these major international NGOs have called out the Indian atrocities in Kashmir. And they have specifically pointed out that certain laws that have just been mentioned in the report, such as TADA, the Terrorism and Disruption Act, and POTA, the Prevention of Terrorism Act, these are black laws. These are laws that are almost unprecedented in any other place of the world. These laws that have the assent of the Indian Parliament are being used to brutalize Kashmiris, to kill them, to maim them, and to carry out sentences that are absolutely unthinkable. So we know for a fact that NGOs have played their role. The problem was always the translation of the role that NGOs have played into the parliaments of the world, wherein they would stand up and condemn these acts. So, for instance, we have recently seen that the American Congress has been very vocal about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And they have spoken about it at length almost in every single meeting that they've had. The exact same rules apply to the Indian occupation of Kashmir, wherein they have illegally annexed a territory and they continue to brutalize the people of Kashmir in a manner that is no different from the way Russia might be doing in Ukraine. But if
so Safi, what you're trying to say is that there is a certain politicking when it comes to which countries are chosen by the West in order for them to move forward to make their current situation better, and there is a certain form of politicking that is used for countries such as India, where the same issues, as you yourself pointed out, are happening, but no tangible action is being taken. Do you really feel that that can change? Do you feel a lone voice such as that of Ilhan Omar could pave the way for some kind of change, or do you feel it will be as routine as it has been in the past few years and months?
Right, so Omar, we can never really underestimate the voice of one person. The United States is a country which has freedom of expression, and it has a history of where people, an individual may have spoken up, and that has led to a mass change. Ilhan Omar could be that agent of change, so obviously I would not discount it. But that said, we also need to look at Ilhan Omar's unique position within the US Congress itself. And unfortunately, she does not seem to have many allies. We have seen time and again the countless bills that Ilham has presented being shot down. Some of them have been called anti-Semitic, some of them have been called racist, some of them have been called homophobic. And Ilham Omar herself has been a subject of tremendous criticism by the US establishment, so to speak. And so if one was to look at the situation on ground, one would believe, of course, that these things would not have any impact right now. But the very fact that such an act, such a voice could be raised on the floor of the US Congress itself is a massive step. And if one person can do it, so can another person, and then it could be a snowball effect. So we should always hope for the best, and we should always hope that these things will translate into better results for the future, even if
all right, now, Safi, let's look at something that she said in early April. Now, she questioned the alleged reluctance of the US government to criticize Narendra Modi, who is Indian Prime Minister, and his government on human rights. And days later, we saw that Under Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, US Secretary of State, in fact, Anthony Blinken said that Washington was monitoring the rise in human rights abuses in India by some government, police, and prison officials. Do you feel there is some kind of an effect of what she is saying in the Congress, even though a lot of her bills are put aside and rejected by the Congress at large, but maybe some issues do resonate with the US Congress?
Absolutely. And once again, not only the fact that her saying it in the US Congress would lead to an echo in parliaments around the world, That's very important. So this would give further gravitas to the Pakistani parliament. This would result in this issue being raised in, for instance, the British parliament and in the various parliaments of countries that have at least a semblance of sympathy for the Kashmiri cause. So we could expect something of that sort happening because of the bravery of one person, and I really do appreciate that. And I also want to clarify that Ilham Umar is seen as a radical, and there are many other radical politicians who tend to side with her who have a much greater voice. So, for instance, Ilham Umar seems to have a lot of goodwill coming in from Bernie Sanders. And the Bernie group, as far as OAS is concerned, several other radical politicians of the Democratic Party are concerned, they might just start voicing it out in a much better manner than Ilham herself could, because they share a common perspective on many matters. And I think it's a very good idea to appeal to the American left, which is growing in power, to try and raise its voice on the various issues that affect Islamophobia and the Kashmir issue in particular.
That is true. Safi, now I'd also like to understand the Indian perspective, the Indian reaction that came when Ilham Umar came to Pakistan and of course started to give her comments that did not go well with the Indian government. The spokesperson of India's Ministry of External Affairs, as per the sources, has said, and I quote, "Let me just say that if such a politician wishes to practice a narrow-minded politics at home, narrow-minded politics, that's her business, but violating our territorial integrity and sovereignty makes us ours, and we think the visit is condemnable." There are two aspects to it. Narrow-minded politics. Do you feel talking about Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the brutalities is narrow-minded politics? The connection.
Hello?
Yes, Safi, we are here. I was asking you whether the talking about and discussing Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir was part of narrow-minded politics, as has been said by the spokesperson of the Indian External Affairs Ministry.
That's absolutely senseless. Even before she said anything, when she just planned her visit, the Indian Foreign Ministry was already shouting about what a terrible move it is and how she should not go into what they call the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And if she were to go, that would infringe their rights somehow. I feel this is where the insecurities of India shine through. Pakistan has a long history of inviting foreign dignitaries and taking them to Azad Kashmir, or what Indians call Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. However, in a stark contrast, India has never taken any foreign dignitary to go and see on ground for themselves the situation in what we would call Indian-held Kashmir. And that in itself shows the kind of insecurity India has. Pakistan does and can easily take any independent witness to go and see what life is like for a Kashmiri here in the Pakistani side of the Kashmir, whereas an Indian simply cannot. And they cannot because they are consistently afraid that people will say things that will continue to undermine the Indian narrative on Kashmir. And whereas the Indian narrative on Kashmir is now being revved up by various propaganda machineries like the Kashmir Files, which you might have heard of recently.
Yes.
These things will not stand the test of time. You cannot fool all of the people all of the time. And that is unfortunately something that India has been doing successfully so for a very long time. But I don't believe that they would be able to for a very long time.
All right, the second part of the same quote that I'd like your comment on is that the spokesperson allegedly says that her visit and her talking about this issue is violating our territorial integrity and sovereignty, and they feel that this visit is condemnable. What's your take on these 2 points? A visit being condemnable, this is a very strong statement. And secondly, that the Ilham Umar is violating the Indian territorial integrity and sovereignty by talking about Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Right. Well, obviously, I think that's a legal term. So when we talk about violation of territorial integrities, or as was recently the case in the government, when the word interference was used as opposed to conspiracy. So these words are used when you believe that you have a particular area, a territory is yours, and somebody else is going into there illegally. India believes that the Pakistan held or the Pakistani area of Kashmir is what they call Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, much like we call it the Indian-held Kashmir. And so they believe that anybody who goes into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is going into essentially what is Indian territory, but is doing so without Indian consent. And this is the narrative that they have built up for an international perspective, which they continue to harp on about wherever they go. So this is expected. These are just legal terms which do not carry any value other than the fact that India has a narrative that it continues to push, and this is just a step in that direction.
All right, when you talk of a step in that direction, you know that there are different resolutions, countless resolutions, let's put it that way, on Indian illegal occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The first resolution, in fact, was requested by India way back in 1948. Since then, there have been a number of resolutions. How can they call, for example, the Azad Jammu and Kashmir as Pakistan occupied Kashmir, or the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir as part of their land, when in fact it is a disputed land, as is contested in the United Nations resolutions?
No, so Umar, that's what the dispute is. India says that it is their land. That's what the dispute is, and they say that Pakistan is not. Pakistan has illegally occupied parts of their land, whereas Pakistan's perspective is that the region that we call Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and also Kashmir, Indian-held occupied Kashmir and Jammu is Pakistani territory. So this is what the dispute is. There have been resolutions and passed by the United Nations on these disputes to try and determine which state should inherit these places. However, no progress has been made for over 50 years on any of these UN disputes. And I think the prime culprit for this is once again the United States, which was one of the primary sponsors of these resolutions. And it was the United States which has the overarching responsibility as the so-called policeman of the globe to ensure that these resolutions are implemented in letter and spirit and carry them out one way or the other, because this is a dispute that has been going on for ages. And
exactly.
We unfortunately see nothing happening on either side. Regardless, it's not about who wins or who loses. It's about the resolution. And what we see is there is no attempt of resolution from any global power, from the United Nations. And unfortunately, the only party that has been continuously talking about wanting to resolve this issue is Pakistan. We saw Prime Minister Shahbaz Shareef just take oath and mention this in his oath-taking ceremony, and on his first address to the nation. And this is something that every single Prime Minister of Pakistan has addressed whenever they have took office and they have made their first address to the nation, which is a stark contrast to the fact that no Indian Prime Minister has ever done the same whenever they have taken office, because they are simply not interested in resolving this issue. The status quo suits them.
So let's hope the status quo kind of changes with pressure being put by Congress men and women such as Ilhan Omar. And once she's here and she sees, as she's seen firsthand, the experiences of the people, she's talked to the people in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and she's gone to the border areas from where the Indian side has been violating the 2003 ceasefire agreement. Let's hope, let's pray, Safi, that some good comes out of it. Although we will remain skeptical, we will have this cautious optimism about the future of the area. Nevertheless, we need to remain optimistic. Thank you very much, Safiullah Khan Ghauri, to have joined us and to have talked to us about a very important topic, that is in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, in the context of Congresswoman, US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar in Pakistan. And let's hope this is a small step towards the larger cause and this brings about a good change for that cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the merged tribal areas. Now, we know that there have been a lot of issues in those merged tribal areas, especially in the last few days and weeks, because of the violations from across the territory from Afghanistan, where TTP has been involved in such measures, and that has resulted in a not so normal situation, especially in the holy month of Ramadan, for the people of the merged tribal areas. Our Prime Minister Shahbaz Shareef took a visit to the area and has said that he's going to convene a grand jirga of elders of the area in Islamabad to find a way out of the prevailing situation. More in the following report.
Pakistan, as torchbearer of peace, has been spearheading various initiatives to prompt stability and security, not only in domestic setting but also in regional ambience. In order to achieve cherished goal of peace by catalyzing domestic cooperation to deal with existing and emerging security challenges, Prime Minister Shahbaz Shareef vowed to convene a grand jirga of elders in tribal districts. eulogizing security forces for their success in breaking the back of terrorism and defeating and degrading all types of terrorist organizations and dismantling their infrastructure. Prime Minister paid rich tribute to martyrs. Representing an excellent initiative of Government of Pakistan to combat scourge of terrorism, Premier Shahbaz announced the establishment of a university, a medical college, Danish schools and a mobile hospital in North Waziristan. Elders of tribal district have expressed concern about terrorist attack and urged the federal government to hold a meaningful dialogue with the banned outfits for durable peace in the region. The poor socio-economic conditions of tribal people and prolonged war and terrorism had devastated Pakistan in general and its tribal region in particular. Serious efforts have been made to hold meaningful talks with stakeholders for durable peace. In order to kickstart socio-economic development in the region, the priority has to be given for development package to ensure civic facilities for the local communities at par with the rest of Pakistan.
Defence Analyst Brigadier retired Nadir Saab joins us online. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. So the merged tribal areas and the issues, whether it be related to violence, we know that they have also been the brunt of terrorism in the last few decades, and the army and the armed forces have really done their maximum to remove all such elements. But lately we've also seen the incidents happening from across the border in Afghanistan, and in the holy month of Ramadan that leads to a very unstable situation in the merged tribal areas. Now, do you feel the current government can do something for the uplift along with the armed forces of Pakistan, because there is of course this grand jirga that will be called by the current Prime Minister Shahbaz Shareef to find a way out of the current situation that the people of the merged tribal areas are engulfed in? What's your take on that, sir?
As chairman of Pakistan National Reform Movement, I have said that geoeconomics and geopolitics have to go hand in glove, which basically means that the basic objective in our merged tribal areas along our western border is peace and prosperity. Now the question is, how do we get this peace and prosperity? First of all, socio-economic cycle has to be revived. The people of the areas along the western borders of Pakistan have, over the last many years, suffered a lot, and because of all that was going on in Afghanistan and also locally in Pakistan. And they have to be the main beneficiary. So that means a special economic package has to be brought about in this turbulent area, which has a turbulent history, of course, so that people here feel, first of all, that they are part of Pakistan and they are benefiting from it. This is one. And as you've very correctly said, tremendous sacrifices have been given by the Pakistan armed forces, all of them, the army and the security forces, and our young officers and soldiers have given their blood just to bring peace here. Overall, this is also linked with the peace in Afghanistan. In my book, War on the Global Chessboard, I had said that, which was about geoeconomics, that you have to see the bigger picture also, because we are basically talking or focused on our tribal areas, merged tribal areas, Waziristan, our line across the western border, but it has a bigger connotation, a bigger picture geographically, historically, economically, and that is that Afghanistan, Central Asia, and all have to be linked with Gwadar. So Waziristan, our merged tribal areas, and areas across the western border have special significance. So in the sense that they are part of this new network of roads, transit, trade, and all the economic benefits, so that people, the terrorists, who are these terrorists? They haven't come from the moon. They are from those areas across Pakistan's border or within our. So they have to be brought away from this militancy and terrorism into the mainstream where they have stakes. They have to be made stakeholders. Of course, this alone will not suffice. I have said it separately, that Pakistan has also to simultaneously pursue a very proactive policy of dealing with or striking all forms of terrorists, even across the border, with various capabilities that we have. Because it's not just a defensive war that you can win, that is an asymmetrical war, that terrorists keep attacking you and you keep fighting. Even today, and every few days you hear that our young officers and soldiers are falling shaheed, giving blood for this country, whether in Balochistan or in tribal areas or any part of Pakistan, but more so on the west, along the western borders of western regions of Pakistan. So this is a war of a different kind, and it has to be won, and we can win it but we have to be very proactive about it, and we have to have zero tolerance on that. And besides
when sir, you talk about the government and the forces being proactive as far as completely eliminating all forms of terrorism and extremism from the merged tribal areas is concerned, what kind of way forward do you foresee? And at the same time, I'd also like to ask your point of view on what should be the vision of any government, whether it be this government, of course, that is currently in place of Mia Shahbaz Shareef Saab, to uplift the current conditionalities, socio-economic conditionalities of the people of the merged tribal areas. And these are two parallel questions, so I'd like your point of view on both of them.
Basically, this is an issue of the state of Pakistan. It is not an issue of the current government or the previous government or the next government or any government. I mean, the government has to deal with it. But it is a Pakistani issue. We have to look at the history. Basically, the history is that the Pakistan that we got on the western border, that is our western border, was what was the limits of the British Empire. That is, and you know the whole, I won't go into the 3 Afghan wars and all that. That's history, so I don't want to go into it. That's what we got there. And it's a legacy of that, and then you had the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the Mujahideen resistance to it, then the Taliban, then 20 years of US and NATO, and all the spillover effects of that also, and are within our own areas, there have been so many indigenous or local or forces aligned with them or related to them. There are two things. One is that the people of this area deprived or need to be, let's say, brought up through special packages. It's not just by doling out money. It includes health, it includes education, and it includes job opportunities. When you talk of this at the macro level, it's not just opening a department and giving jobs to people. When we talk at the macro level, I'm referring again to my book, Ghauri on the Global Chessboard. That's the whole greater vision that you link Pakistan, not just this area, but through this area, through Afghanistan into Central Asia. You have the Chinese corridor, CPEC, that too is from my book, inspired from my book. So when you link, because Central Asia is landlocked, I talked with a number of ambassadors from Central Asian countries some time back, and they said that after the Americans, NATO leave and the war is over, then they will come in a big way. So that time has come now. In that sense, Afghanistan has to be brought into this also, because the terrorism which is emanating today, most of it is coming from Afghanistan or across. And we have to deal with it both ways. One is to give them geo-economic incentives to bring them, make them players in this and beneficiaries. But the other side is zero tolerance. You have to have a very hard stick also. That's what you call it, carrot and stick, and whatever you want to call it, that is a fact of life. So the point is, you have to make sure that we are not fighting a defensive war only, which we are right now. We have to make sure that anyone who strikes Pakistan from anywhere, we strike him back, wherever he may be.
All right, now Mia Shahbaz Shareef Saab, as you very well know, during his current visit to the merged tribal areas, did announce the establishment of a university, medical college, mobile hospital and the Danish school in North Waziristan. He also said that he will announce more development schemes for the district very, very shortly. You said that, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 measures are not important. There needs to be a whole collective measure to improve the socio-economic situation of the people, and of course the violence goes hand in hand, because if you are socio-economically stable, then not only can you thwart any elements, but maybe such elements can also change their mindset. This is what this is, I think, the gist of what you're trying to say as well, that if you uplift the socio-economic condition of the people of the merged districts, maybe those elements who are trying to create havoc in Pakistan might also have a change of heart. Do you feel that is possible?
Of course it's possible, and it has to be done. A simple example is that many people from our, I would say, along the western border or Waziristan or merged tribal areas, whatever you want to call them, this whole package of geography. Many of those people from those areas are living, doing business and thriving in Karachi. See how they behave in Karachi and see how they behave in that area. There is a difference, because of course, it doesn't mean that in Karachi there is no violence. Of course, in all cities there are issues. That's another point. But I'm trying to say those people who come to Karachi or many other areas of Pakistan or other parts of urban centers or other, when they are employed into this, for example, they have to be there. Besides what all is being done, which is a good thing, and that the Prime Minister is doing and the army is also doing, which is a very good thing and it needs to be done. What I'm trying to explain is that we also have to look at it as a bigger picture. You see, you have to have a complete giant economic cycle which involves Afghanistan and Central Asia also. And because of the trade and transit, all the businesses that come with it and so many other things, because of that, and they pass through these areas, and then we need to develop along the western border and along the merged tribal areas, different kind of economic zones, which involve people into that. But at the same time, besides economics, it's also social aspects, it's also education, it's also health. I'm trying to say the government is doing it. Every government does it. There is no denying that every government tries. All I'm trying to suggest is that we need to do it on an even bigger macro level. And there are certain things which I can highlight where there have to be special incentives for youth. For example, like students in various universities get laptops or other kinds of stipends or other kinds of facilities. The youth in this area, these areas, they have to be given special privileges or special treatment or special, things to bring them back into the mainstream rather than they go into militancy, terrorism and those kinds of things. They have to be brought into the national mainstream.
All right. Speaking about bringing people into the national mainstream, how much do you feel is the resolve of the people of the merged tribal areas also to bring about that change within themselves? You know, there's one thing that any government, whether it be this one or the previous or the next government, that are trying, as you have yourself said, to bring about a socio-economic uplift in the merged tribal areas. But you say it needs to be done more robustly at a more macro level. But at the same time, do you feel that the people of the area are also ready to accept that change?
People of all areas want change for the better. I started this Gwadar project. It is based on this book of mine, Gwadar on the Global Chessboard, which was published in 2010. But I worked when I was working in the army in year 2000, I made the Gwadar concept. And even then there was resistance to Gwadar and this, what later came to be CPEC. But when people found out how much beneficial it is, most of the people who are supporting the local people, because they are benefiting. There is a road from Gwadar to Turbat and people and other places now, I mean all the ways, where people can travel easily. And I'm not saying this, people of the local areas are saying it. People of the many areas are getting, it takes time, of course. It takes a little time. So there is, the people of the area want to benefit. But the question is, the second thing is that there is a role which our media has to play. You see, our media, in our country, as you know, what all is happening today, our media and the whole country, I'm not saying the media, we are focused on many other things. But what I'm trying to say, the whole country, which includes the media, which is an instrument of state power, the media is very, very essential in today's world, both electronic, print, and of course social media. That too has to come into play. If we can divert some of the energies of our media onto these people and bring them forward, it will go a long way. Those people have to feel they are as good Pakistanis as living in Islamabad, Karachi, Lahore or anywhere, and with as much prospect. And this is not a Pakistani problem also, by the way. Many countries in the world have faced. China is trying to develop its Xinjiang province, which underdeveloped compared to its coastal regions historically. United States developed its west coast, and numerous. Russia developed its eastern region, Siberia and all. So these problems are faced. There is.
Of course, so what you are trying to say is that there needs to be this resolve that not only needs to be done by the government, but there needs to be an equal reaction from the different communities in the merged tribal areas. But there is that resolve to bring about a change and to become a better society, and that is why the current government also and the armed forces are doing this joint resolve to bring about a change in the merged tribal areas. We understand the dynamics, we understand the issues that they are currently confronted with, but the current government has this resolve. And inshallah, we hope that in the coming days and weeks, there will be more and more changes that will be brought about for the betterment of the people of the merged tribal districts, for their uplift, for their socio-economic uplift, so that they can be and they can contribute towards Pakistan in different levels as well. Let's come to our third segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Earth Day. This year's theme is to invest in our planet. And of course, Earth Day is very important not only in Pakistan but across the globe. But for Pakistan, it's even more important because Pakistan is one of the countries that is most affected by the issues of climate change, one of the most vulnerable countries. That is to talk about today's significance and climate change, as well as other issues that plague the world as far as climate is concerned. We have been joined by Nadir Barech. He is the CEO of PPAF. Barech Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. It's a pleasure to have you on board for this segment. Barech Saab, Earth Day, where the theme is to invest in our planet, do you feel that Pakistan and other countries of the world are investing enough in the planet?
Well, thank you. Thank you for providing me this opportunity. In fact, Earth Day 2022, it's an enormous, amazing opportunity for all of us to billions of people around the world to join hands and to help shape a better future. As far as the action that are taken at global level and at national level, I think global carbon emission, as you know, it's 43 billion tons carbon emission, and this figure of 2019. Whereas if you look at Pakistan, Pakistan only contributes 0.9% of this emission. And also, I think Pakistan has suffered a lot as far as the effect of climate change are concerned. We have seen frequent flash floods, earthquakes, severe drought, heat waves, cyclones, locust attack. And I think government of Pakistan has made tremendous efforts also. If you look at the institution base, after 2005 earthquake, ERA was established, and the earthquake Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Authority, then National Disaster Management Authority, and now National Disaster Risk Management Fund. And also at the provincial level, efforts were made to establish and strengthen provincial disaster management authorities. At the district level, district disaster management authorities. And also, as you know, a lot of efforts have gone into alternate energy, the 10 billion tsunami trees. So these are all efforts that Pakistan has made. Although I think we are less contributor to the global carbon emission, but its effect on Pakistan are tremendous. So while the globe has to contribute its bit, Pakistan also has to strengthen its response further in the climate change effect.
Now, when you talk of strengthening Pakistan's response as far as climate change is concerned, one of the recent estimates as far as pollution puts Pakistan as the 4th most polluted country in the world with the 2nd worst quality of air. We've also seen Karachi, we've seen Lahore as one of the most polluted cities in the world as well, as per certain estimates. Why is that so in your point of view, and what can be done?
Well, in fact, the brown issues do prevail in urban areas particularly. And again, I would say that this is because of the overpopulation, overpopulated cities, the lack of control on motor vehicle emissions. Then also we are in an area like just a couple of days ago, typhoon kind of thing that came from Goran. So the dust pollution also is one of the contributors. So these are all contributing factor to the brown issues in Pakistan also.
Yes, all right, sir. When it comes to the WHO guidelines, the average lifespan of Pakistan citizens is being shortened by at least 4 years as the air pollutants and irritants are being inhaled. Now, when you look at the air pollution, and we've just talked about it, apart from the fact that it happens in the big cities such as Lahore and Karachi, do you feel this could further exacerbate in the days and months and the years to come? And if so, should the industrial sector be modernized in such a way so as to have less pollution in these big areas, so as to also help the general public in the world, as this WHO estimate points out?
Well, I think we need to promote clean energy, green energy in our country. Some efforts are being made, and you're very right that we need to regulate our industries also, so that the emission that is coming from industries and polluting these big cities, that could be controlled. And I fear that, yes, you are right, that if similar situation continues, the other cities like the industrial cities, particularly Faisalabad, Sialkot and other cities, Lasbela, for example, in Balochistan, in KP also. So these industrial areas, definitely they are going to contribute more to these brown issues. And I think the industrial emission need to be controlled through promotion of green energy and green technologies.
All right, sir. Also, waste treatment facilities. When you look at the industrial areas, not all of them have waste treatment facilities available. Then we also have a huge issue of waste inside of cities such as Karachi. Do you feel that also should be looked upon with a more aggressive attitude so as to counter further deterioration as far as climate change is concerned in Pakistan?
I think we need to look at all issues, the blue issues, the brown issues, and also which includes the solid waste management. We need to look at that. We need to make arrangements for the same. And I think apart from strengthening institutions that the government is already trying to do so, I think we need to get engaged at the grassroots level. And as you know, that Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund, we are trying to work at the community level, community development. We have got more than 140,000 community institutions that have been formed in 147 districts of Pakistan. So I think for all these issues, for biodiversity conservation, for integrated water resource management, we need to promote integrated natural resource management also, and at the same time addressing the issues of waterborne disease, for example, this sewerage, sanitation, and solid waste management. These are all very important areas, and most of the areas are badly affected by that. There are 22 diseases, as you know, which are because of the waterborne diseases. So at one time, we need to strengthen our health response to address the effect of climate change on our population. At the same time, we need to undertake certain preventive measures, also engaging communities at large, and more coordinated efforts of government of Pakistan, provincial governments, the district governments, civil society institutions, and community at large. So I think we need to join hands, and particularly on this day, Earth Day. So we celebrate we also call it Mother Earth Day. So I think it's responsibility of every individual and of course the state itself.
So when you talk of coordinated approach, you have talked about your organization, the PPAF also, that has worked relentlessly as far as avoiding all the issues that concern climate change are concerned and working towards alleviation of those issues is concerned. When you talk of coordinated efforts, how much of a response have you seen by the other sectors apart from your own?
Well, I think a lot of efforts are being put, but still there is a need. Particularly, you know, after the 18th Amendment, a lot of responsibility has gone to provinces, and I think provinces need to act proactively, and also we need to invest in provincial institutions for this response. And the coordination, I think we did make an attempt, for example, in some provinces to have a kind of environment club where most of the government entities, the civil society institutions, UN institutions, they could come together. So I think we need to have a kind of mechanism right from top. I think there has to be some sustainable development forum chaired by Honorable Prime Minister, and then at the provincial level, the Chief Minister should be chairing all those to give priority to these issues, and then taking along all government, non-government organization, and the private sector at large, because the private sector also is a contributor to this carbon emission. So I think we need to take them along, and a formal institutional mechanism need to be set up to strengthen coordination at all levels.
All right, Barech Sahab, you also talked in the very beginning that Pakistan, although being one of the most vulnerable countries across the world as far as climate change is concerned, is not the primary reason for which it is the most vulnerable. In fact, it is the effect of other countries that are not following the rules and regulations as they should, that Pakistan has become one of the countries that has become most vulnerable to it, although it has its challenges itself. But on the global level, if we come out of Pakistan and look at the globe as such, whether it be COP26, the Paris Agreement, and so many other agreements that have been formed as far as climate change is concerned, do you feel that the important countries, the West, are really adhering to the laws and regulations pertaining to climate change as they should?
Well, I think first we need to understand that Pakistan, you know, it's as I mentioned earlier on, that we are only contributing 0.9% in the global emission. And whereas if you look at the vulnerable states that are affected by the climate change, so our rank comes 8th at the top. So which means we are one of the top 10 countries who are badly affected by the climate change. And to that respect, I think the global community, particularly the developed world that is contributing more to this population emission, I think their response needs to be further strengthened. This is not sufficient, and I think the Kyoto Protocol that was long ago overdue, but due to some resistance from some developed nations, it could not get through. And now recently the Paris Declaration, I think that's a kind of hope for that the world will contribute more significantly, particularly those who are contributing to this emission, who are contributing to this climate change, who are contributing to the damage of ozone layer. So I think they have more responsibility. And also, countries like Pakistan, we are developing countries, and climate change affects directly on our livelihood also. So our economies, as you know, that Pakistan, if you look at Pakistan, major portion of our GDP goes in debt servicing. So we have got very limited resources to contribute our bit, whereas the developed nations, the developed countries, the West particularly, who are contributing more to this emission, their response, I think, is still negligible, I would say. So that response needs to be strengthened.
Final question, Mr. Barech, I'd like a very short answer to it. You have worked extensively on the Balochistan water strategy. You have done a lot of work on climate action in Pakistan. If I were to ask you whether there is light at the end of the tunnel for Pakistan and for the world as far as climate change is concerned, what would your answer be?
I think we are on the right direction. Pakistan has already set its goal for, converting our energy 60% to renewable energy and 30% electric cars in the future. The 10 billion tsunami trees initiative that is being undertaken, the efforts to mitigate effects of disaster, I think lot is being done in that respect. So I think we have got a clear direction, and we just need to accelerate its implementation, invest more resources into it. The Climate Change Ministry, I think it's now getting strengthened. So I think that we can accelerate our response. Right. But we actually need is to invest in how to conserve the natural resources and how to safeguard the livelihood of people. As you know that during the last 2 decades, there had been more than 18 billion losses just because of the flood, $18 billion losses. More than 3.5 million households were affected due to floods. So we are being affected due to not our...
Of course, we are being affected. We are making the right changes, Mr. Barech. And as I've understood what you're trying to say is that we need to be more proactive. But of course, you are very optimistic as far as the future of Pakistan and the world is concerned, as far as climate change and the alleviation of the effects of climate change are concerned. Thank you very much, Mr. Nadir Barech, CEO of PPAF, to have joined us and to have talked to us about climate change on this very day, that is Earth Day, and the theme being to invest in our planet. Finally, before we leave, I'd like to pay homage to Mr. Moin Akhtar. He's being remembered today on his 11th death anniversary. List of awards, nominations including Honorary Citizenship of Dallas, Special Award for Comedy, Pride of Performance, Sitara Imtiaz. He was a wonderful, wonderful person, not only a wonderful professional, but a wonderful person as well. I've had the privilege of kind of growing up with him and seeing him evolve, and he's been to us. I've seen him firsthand, and he was a beautiful human being. Not only that, he was a wonderful professional, as you can see in the thousands and thousands of performances that he has put forward. And his legend, as we always say, still will always live on. His legacy will live on through those countless shows, those countless serials that he has made. And he has so much to his credit that a lot of people will not be able to emulate that, but he has set an example for many to follow. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah next week. New stories, new challenges, and of course concerning Pakistan and the world. We bid you farewell for this weekend. Have a great one and have a blessed fast as well. Allah Hafiz.